I worry about the AAP because the Endocrine Society put out guidelines in 2017, and they were very careful in the guidelines. One, to point out that the evidence was of low and very low quality. And they also said in the guidelines that they have no idea how you identify which kids are trans and require this treatment. So they were sort of like, we're just technicians, and we'll just tell you, like, if you have a trans kid, we'll tell you how to do the transition. And then the American Academy of Pediatrics the next year just leapt into that void and said, oh, we'll tell you how you know which kids. You ask them. And if they say they're trans, then they're trans. And so, like, when we get to the lawsuits, I'm very worried about the AAP, like, being called to have some responsibility for letting everybody know that the only thing you need to do is ask.
So as a practicing pediatrician, what was your understanding of the issue prior to 2018, prior to the issuance of this letter?
Prior to 2018, I think, let me think. I'm not sure. I'm trying to think what year I saw my first trans patient. It might have been prior to I think prior to 2018, I had maybe one trans patient. Like, this is a thing that occurred in 2 out of 10,000 children.
Right.
It was, a thing a pediatrician could go their entire career and never see.
Yeah.
And so the first time I had a patient who told me that ever since they were 2 or 3, they knew that they were actually a boy, I was like, oh, that's transgender. I've heard of that. There's a gender clinic over at the Children's Hospital. I'll send you. And that's how I was. But then there was another one, and another one, and another one.
And when did that start happening?
Yeah, that was in late 2018. That was in 2018, 2019.
So one in like 10, 20 years.
One in 20 years, yeah.
And then
they started to come every few months, and then more often, yeah.
And they were not saying I've always been a boy. They were saying I realized I was a boy last week. When I turned 12.
I mean, most of them have been online, and they know the story they need to tell. So, no, I don't think any of them said that I just decided on this last week. But they didn't have, convincing anecdotes of how this manifested in their toddlerhood. Not like the first one.
Right.
And the first one's family backed them up. Yeah.
So you started to see this thing, and then the letter came out. How was this taken by pediatricians? How was it taken?
You know what?
Was it a shock? Was it?
No. No, this wasn't a shock because they just released it very quietly. I didn't even know it existed. It wasn't until later that I started asking questions like, wait, every single kid I send to the gender clinic gets put on puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones, generally at the first visit.
At what age did it start?
A 12-year-old was offered puberty blockers at the first visit. And so just it was happening immediately. And so I started to get worried that, they weren't acting like a proper subspecialist clinic where they're doing like a significant evaluation and figure out, is this kid really, going to benefit from this treatment, or does this kid have something else going on? As soon as I figured out that is not what was happening, then I didn't want to send anybody to the gender clinic anymore.